Ancient Greeks are known for their philosophers, architectures, theatrics, and legends of gods and goddesses, but what about their hygienic practices? So, let's say you did need to take a bath or head over to the public bathing facilities. Total hair removal was also important, as they also have specialized tools to scrape off dirt from their bodies after exercising. And considering majority of athletes in their respected sports needed to get into the groove, would often find themselves covered in oil, so they couldn't go straight into washing. So they would have to use a special tool called a strigil to scrape or shave off the oil. In these cultures, the strigils was primarily used by men, specifically men or male athletes, as there are some evidence strigils are being used though throughout all people. Strigils were commonly used by individuals who were to engage in vigorous activities in which they accumulated large amounts of dirt and sweat on their body. The people who used the strigil, including athletes, were typically the wealthy, soldiers, and more. Of course, the wealthy or prestigious individuals often had slaves to wield the strigils and clean off their bodies, rather than doing it themselves. Strigils were not only in a practical sense, but culturally as well. They are often found in tombs and burials, in some cases along with a bottle of oil. As it is obvious from the strigils found in previous discussed tombs, strigils could often differ in the types of metal used, designed, depending on the status of the individual it belonged to. Time period and other relevant factors, the typical metals used for strigils were bronze and iron. In ancient Greeks, athletes used to go to the gymnasium naked and they ran for long distance without clothes. But this isn't the strangest part of it. It turns out that at the end of their routines, athletes sold their sweat. Groups of slaves working as glorious collectors would have to do just that, as they would run around collecting all the scrapings and bottling up all the weird, disgusting things that fell off the athletes' bodies. These scrapings would be then sold as medicine, and people would rub the sweat of the athletes onto their skin, as they believed it calmed down the aches and pains, which it probably didn't do much particularly well. It probably had a placebo effect, but it was still customary for the ancient Greeks to buy the sweat emanated by the naked bodies of athletes, as it was believed to relieve muscle aches and headaches when it's mixed with specific oils. Well, as with almost everything else the Romans did also copy the Greeks, there are two possible sources: that either the Greeks of Magna Graecia, where the Severus is said to have the public baths since the 6th century BCE, or the Hellenistic kingdoms of the Diadochoi, who copied their colonias based off of their hometowns in Macedonia. Who did what and where and how, who did it start with? I don't know. Either way, ancient Greeks' baths and the general ancient Agora of Thessaloniki had part of a brother complex that also held a sauna and a taverna, or even thought it was the public bath. It was more like a ancient public spa. The public part would be typically covered, but they also had private houses and private rooms. At least those who can afford it obtained a private lounge. Most of these houses and spas, public bathing would be cleaned in separate areas, as general bathing spaces in homes were found typically behind houses, as it benefited the house by removing gray water and waste throughout the pipes, and also ran into the back streets, dividing adjacent house plots together. And yeah, ancient Greeks also dyed their hair. Cosmetics were also known for thousands of years in ancient Egypt, where they also used lead compounds applied as foundations or eye makeup. A hair dye recipe first described in the Greco-Roman times involved applying a paste of lead oxide and calcium hydroxide or lime, or to graying or fair locks as it is framed in Grecian formula. Also, a lead-based recipe, repeated applications darken the hair as much as desired. Researchers knew that lead lime mixed with reactions to sulfur present in hair keratin proteins to form crystals to lead sulfide, also called as galena. Just like today, darker hair, darker brown hair were prominent, and there were all sorts of colors from deep dark black to very light blonde. In ancient texts, we sometimes read about the hair color again, as there's blonde, but it's much rare as it is today, but it was praised to be kinda rare when it wasn't really that rare. In fact, entire cities were famous of people who had yellow hair. And exercise, of course, is part of the hygiene, and when we see the Greek statues of the ancient times, and we notice how really clearly how built they are. The ancient Greeks were often great believers in exercise and physical culture. They had many athletic competitions, and the most famous of which we know is the Olympic Games. To remain healthy, and the organisms need adequate exercise and physical activity to stay in shape. It also needs adequate rest and sleep, of course, to allow the regenerative process to help time to restore the vital reserves, as optimum health expands and depends on finding the right balance between exercise and rest. Exercise is vigorous physical activity, but vigorousness is relative. What may be vigorous activity for some may not be for others, and training like a Greek athlete goes to the following steps. They also include boxing, wrestling, running, and armed one-on-one combat, weight throwing, archery, and chariot racing, many of which of the same events would be later included in the Olympic Games. Emotions are something that people don't think to regulate as part of a hygienic sort of thing. In fact, I don't even think the average person at all thought it was going to be part of this list, but when it comes to ancient Greeks, emotions were actually seen pretty influential to your everyday today, which, to be honest, as it should. should. In modern medicine, we tend to take very mechanical views of the body and the psychological and physiological functions of its component organs. But in Greek medicine and other traditional medical systems, the internal organs were seen as being strongly affected by the emotions. The heart, being the principal organ of the vital faculty, is very sensitive to emotional states. Love and emotional will to live are also important to the heart. According to Greek medicine, you can die from a broken heart. And the heart, being the hottest organ in the body, is also very vulnerable to hot, turbulent passions, which can agitate the vital spirits to such an extent that they create a fever, which can be quite high and acute. Greek medicine also calls these fever of energetic or emotional organs ephemeral fevers, as the lungs, being a noble organ of the vital faculty that also works closely together with the heart, are sensitive and vulnerable to many of the same emotional states as the heart, respond similarly. The lungs had a feeling of psychic space, which apparently is used to function. The phrase breathing room is a common expression, and connection to every part of the organs held a significance in ancient Greek medicine. Of course, aside the heart and lungs, and also not limited to the spleen, the stomach, the intestines, and colons, which, to be honest, is pretty cool. And when it came to cleaning one's clothes is seen in evidence of their work on ancient vases. Clothes, however, were washed using water only. Nevertheless, this shows that ancient Greeks too had the knowledge of soap and were aware of the cleaning properties of natural oil, salt, and ashes. How cleanly were the ancient Greeks insofar of washing their clothes in practical personal hygiene? Well, the clothes were cleaned regularly and very efficiently. Clothes could be cleaned at home or be by the sea and the nearby river, and the seashore and the riverbeds, especially made in bends, replaced the usual domestic laundry room. In the open, washing was done by groups of women. The running water and the girls would hit them and step on them, rubbing them on a wad of pebbles. No detergent was used in the classical period, after all. Didn't exist yet. When the cleaning was done, the clothes were spread out on the beach to dry, and it was time for the girls to chit-chat and talk amongst themselves as women. Back at home, the clothes were folded carefully and kept in trunks. Also using herbs, lemons, and apples were used as fragrances and disinfestation. When it comes to dental care, it wasn't as advanced as it is today. They simply used their fingers. Either finger would be wrapped with a cotton cloth and then rubbed over their teeth to clean them. Or the finger was dipped into some powdered substance with special properties to clean the teeth. These tooth powders were the forerunners of our modern toothpaste, or the branch of a tree whose fragrance essential oils have antiseptic and other therapeutic properties for the teeth and gums would be chewed. The chewed end would then become a resemblance of brushes of some sorts, which loose, frayed fibers could be brushed over the teeth to clean them. One native tree to Greece, which is still much used of the ancient Greeks that fits these requirements rather nicely, is the laurel tree, which the Greeks called Daphne. The essential oils are antiseptic and also stimulate blood circulation to the gums, promoting their health and regeneration. After chewing on the branch or the leaves, your mouth is cleaned and left with a fresh, clean scent. Sometimes fresh, fragrant green herbs were chewed after a meal to clean the teeth and mouth and freshen the breath. These fresh herbs include those of fennel, parsley, and lavage. Even today, fresh parsley is even chewed often to remove the odor of garlic. The seeds of these and other plants, such as cardamom, which smells absolutely amazing, were also chewed to clean the mouth and freshen the breath. The tooth powders were also the front runners, as I mentioned, with toothpastes, as they were virtually used the same way to dip and moisten toothbrushes in the tooth powder and brush your teeth with it. Many ingredients that have been used in the tooth powders for hundreds of years are still used in toothpastes today, as some of the herbs and spices are also including minerals, resins, and other natural substances. Of course, not a lot of people think that sleep has a majority focus, as they should. The ancient Greeks were great believers in restorative powers and sleep and rest. Hypnos, their god of sleep and dreams, was seen as the remover of all pain, suffering, and sorrow. Sleep is necessary to allow anabolic processes to opportunity to restore and regenerate the organism and its vitality. What sleep does for the body, dreams do for the mind, and dreams enable the mind to regenerate itself and work off of all stresses, problems, and tensions of the preceding day. When we get sleepy, sweet, warm, moist, sanguine vapors rise from the heart to the head, and one starts to yawn, sigh, and get drowsy. Sleep and then starts to overcome us, and the senses start to interiorize. We close our eyes and fall asleep. As the quintessential of sleep deepens, the sanguine warmth starts to cool off, and the metabolism slows down, and the circulation internalizes the warm body core. And so the sleep and the natural nature of sleep is cold, wet, and phlegmatic. Wakefulness has the opposite nature. Its activity is hot and consuming the nutritive, caloric reserves of the organisms. Wakefulness is dry, and this gives wakefulness a choleric nature and temperament. As wakefulness is like a flame, it consumes the vital nutritive reserves of the organisms. Ambient air is also another thing. I guess in our world society today, we understand pollution is pretty prevalent in our every major city around the world. The Greek physician always considered to making a concession of the patient's country and its prevailing climatic conditions in assessing the patient's health. If possible, adjustments should be made to compensate and for extreme climate. The ancient Greeks and Romans considered themselves to be blessed to live in a country with temperate, sunny climate that wasn't too hot in the summer or too cold in the winter. They recognized the extremes of heat and cold, moisture and dryness placed added stresses stresses and burdens on the individual on their health. Environmentals that are extremely hot and sunny also tend to be dry or excessively dry, such as deserts environments. Over long term, they tend to weather and dry and emancipate the individual. However, they may be therapeutic and remedial for those suffering from a cold, wet affiliation like chronic bronchitis, weeping eczema, or rheumatism. Greek medicine also recognizes the benefits effect of the air of mountains and alpine environments as well as seaside environments upon their health. When it comes to the seaside, it makes sense because of the salt. In particular, the airs tend to be promoting good digestion and sound asleep, which is known even now as we look back throughout history